Hi, professional writers. Welcome to week, I don't even know anymore, week 4, I think. um, uh, I apologize for not getting your emails, your hiring emails, and your complaint letter grades to you sooner. I'm hoping to get those done in the next couple of days, as well as your letter grades. And so hopefully I'll be all caught up. Last week was crazy, but this week things look a little slower. This week is also going to be slightly different. Um, what we're doing is 3 days of reading rather than 2 days of reading, which you will use to compose documents, drafts, and stuff. And so you're going to read for today and for Wednesday, and then also for Thursday before you complete a couple activities, so I know that you understand what we're doing before drafting next week. Okay, so without further ado, let's start talking about memos. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk about writing memos with hats, which are discussed in the Purdue Owl. All right. All right, and also I have for you to lighten the mood and bring you a little bit of humor on this gloomy Monday, mom texts, which are always awesome. Okay, so what is the purpose of a memo according to the Owl at Purdue? What did you find out about the purpose of memos? Hopefully you found out that memos are supposed to bring attention to a problem that is being experienced in your company. Not only do they want to show there is a problem, but they want to show how to solve it. So just identifying a problem is not enough. Propose solutions. And also, finally, make sure to connect the purpose of your document with the interests and needs of your readers. So if you think it's a problem, you have to be able to convince your boss or your employees or whoever you're writing to that it is a problem and it needs to be solved. Okay. Now, your audience is, for memos, always internal. You're never ever going to write these to a customer. Okay? They're internal company documents. This means that they go to your boss or to your employees or to your coworkers. They never go outside of the company. Please remember to include not super sensitive information in memos. We talked a little bit about memos before. Just like with emails, they can be read by multiple people and you don't want to be sending passwords or account numbers or anything like that. Nothing super sensitive. Also, try to send to a small to moderate amount of people. And this is a rule you're going to sometimes break because sometimes you need to send them out to the whole, like a whole group of people, like all the employees. But if it's like to your boss, send it to your boss. Don't send it to everyone, okay? Or if it's to your boss and your assistant boss or something, just send it to those people, okay? So take this last rule with a kind of grain of salt and think about sometimes you're gonna break it. Finally, make sure to communicate your company or job objectives. Make sure that your memo really reflects your values and your mission and your vision, okay? All right. So that's the purpose of your memo. Covered that, to solve problems, and your audience, to solve problems within your company. Let's now talk about how you structure a memo, what the format is going to be. All right, so in your memo, you're going to need headings. The header part of your memo will have to, just kind of like an email, except the to is going to be, instead of to an email address, it's going to be to the person you're sending it to, your boss, their whole name. Even if you call your boss Joe every day, you want to make it a little bit more formal, so you're going to call him Joseph, and then his last name in the memo, and then comma, and then also his title, okay? So to, from, your full official name, not any nicknames, and your title, the date, and a good subject line. And you should think about what we talked about with emails for good specific subject lines. Okay? Again, make sure it's your reader's full name and the job title. Make sure your subject line is specific, but also concise. Okay, you want to give information, but you don't want it to be huge. Now, in other sections of your memo, you want to write single-spaced, no double-spaced in any professional or business writing, okay? You want it all to be to the left ruled, no indentations, and you want to include a space between paragraphs, okay? Most memos will be 1 to 2 pages long, and that's true of the memos you're going to be writing for this course. Usually if it needs to be longer than 1 to 2 pages, you're going to have to write a report rather than a memo. Throughout your memo, you want to use headings, lists, bullet points, bolds. You're going to use formatting to make it readable and to really highlight the important information, okay? All right, okay, so that's kind of the big picture for your memo. So it's the top section in the big picture. Now we're getting into the specific sections of your memo. So remember in your opening to include the purpose of your memo. State it right up front. Don't waste time. Remember in business writing, you want to bluff, not lying. Bottom line up front, all right? So tell them exactly what it's about immediately, first sentence. All right, you want the context and the problem. What is the background? What is the problem? Or what is the problem and what has led to this problem? Okay. Then you want to get into like a specific assignment or task or solution, like what do we need to do about this problem? And then you're going to give a brief outline of what the memo is about. Maybe you're going to go into more depth about the causes of the problem. Maybe you have multiple solutions and you want to advocate for one as the best one. So just give a brief outline about what the memo is about. Remember, memo is only 1 to 2 pages, and it is single-spaced, but double-spaced between paragraphs and bullet points. It's not a long document, so it should be very brief outline. And then make sure your opening section is a really brief paragraph. It should be short, it should be concise. I don't really see why it would be more than 4 lines. But that's kind of not a hard and fast rule. Okay, that's just kind of a general sense. Okay, let's talk about your context, which is like your background, and then your task section, which is like solutions, okay? You should give the event and the circumstances and the background of what caused this problem that your memo is addressing. This might also be where you want to address and prove that there really is a problem that's happening. And then make sure to really include only what your reader needs in this section. Don't overwhelm them with information that they don't care about. Make sure you prove your point, but make sure it's also concise as possible and clear. All right, and then in the task section, which you might highlight with a heading, describe what are you going to do to help solve the problem. You can give multiple solutions or just one solution, okay? So again, make sure you're convincing that a real problem exists and don't include insignificant details that they don't care about. That's kind of a review of what I said already. Okay. If your memo is long enough, you might include a summary section, but you might not if it's short, especially if it's just a page or 2, okay? So you might include a summary section. Okay. Only do this if it's longer than a page, maybe even longer than 2 pages. And it provides brief statements of your key recommendations. So maybe you've looked at multiple solutions and you have 1 or 2 key recommendations. It can include references to methods and the sources you use to discuss the problem and the solutions. Okay. Finally, well, actually, it's not finally. It's almost finally. This is the last section of the body of your memo. This is the last section before your conclusion. This is your discussion section. This is usually your longest section. It includes all the details that support your arguments and your recommendations and your proof that a problem exists. Make sure you begin this section, as with all your sections, with the most important information first. And then move into general info, okay? Or begin with most important, move to least important, begin with general info, move to specific. A lot of times they might not read the whole memo, and so you really want to make sure that they get the important stuff if they're just skimming. Okay, so put that earlier. And include strong points to persuade the reader. Okay, once you've done all those sections, remember you don't have to do all of them. Some of them are going to be, this is a much more fluid document in that it really should adhere to the purpose, right, and the situation. But in all your memos, you will need a closing. So make sure you're courteous and restate what your actions you want your reader to take, even if it seems like you've stated them a million times. Maybe they're only going to read the intro and one section in the conclusion. So make sure to restate what action you want your reader to take and clarify why this will help your reader. This makes you more persuasive. And then, similarly show how your desired actions will make the reader's life easier. Okay. Don't sign a memo. Inevitably, people will sign it as if it's a letter. Don't sign a memo. It's included from the beginning who it's from, which is you. Okay, so no signage. Do not sign. No electronic signature. Don't do it. Okay? All right. Hats. What does hats stand for? Headings, access, typography, and space. And then I will also talk a little bit about design. So let's very quickly, because I only have a few minutes left, go over hats. Now, headings are signposts to guide your reader through documents and announce forthcoming information. They make it much more skimmable. You should have a good number of these, a number that is helpful. You don't want one for every single paragraph, but you do want one for every single section, and maybe ones for important paragraphs within a section. Make sure you make your headings stand out. Make them bigger, make them a different font, make them a different style, make them underlined, something to make them stand out. Okay. Access. What is access? This allows readers to find and understand important information and make it memorable. This often includes the use of bullet points, or dashes. These are really nice to read, also because they include a lot of white space. If you want a reader to follow certain steps, use numbers. Okay, first do this, number 1. Next do this, number 2. Okay. Sometimes tables and graphs are appropriate, sometimes they're not, so that's really a judgment call. Make sure you think of yourself when you're designing memos, and for the rest of the documents in this course, think of yourself as an information designer. You're designing your information in a way that it makes it memorable to the reader, and that it's going to stick with them, and that they're going to be persuaded. And think of you as a really persuasive and accomplished and a person who knows what they're talking about. Okay, finally, typography. This is like font, size, color, underline, bold, stuff like that. Now, there are a couple of rules for typography. Avoid using more than 2 fonts in one document, okay? And then they talk about serif fonts and sans serif fonts. Now, if you look at the font in this PowerPoint, it's sans serif because it doesn't have lots of little kind of curly cues after it. Serif fonts are good for bodies. Sans serifs are good for headings. That's a little confusing, that bullet point. It should be use serif fonts for body and sans serif for headings. And then for headings, you might also want to make them bold or underlined, but don't do both, okay? Avoid super unusual fonts like papyrus. Generally, use 10 to 12, although that's not a hard and fast rule, and make sure it's very visible against a background. You don't want purple against a black background, for instance. Finally, we have space. Use a lot of white space because it makes it easier to read documents. Make sure you have at least 1 inch margins and allow space around visuals and graphics. Don't crowd your words. Make sure they're visible.